So let participants, let's wait for Dr. Tamoghna Sarkar to join us. Okay. On the since we have time, I hope you are listening to me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. On the last day, we are very happy that Professor Ferdinando Sardella, who is a professor of religious studies at Stockholm University in Sweden, he is actually one of the founders of this Bhaktivedanta Research Center. So I requested him to join us on the last day and to tell us about what his vision is about this research center, how we can organize more and more academic activities of the kind that we are having now. So it would be very nice to listen to him. He was in Calcutta for long, in I think in 70s and 80s. So he has agreed to join us online. So we are really happy to have him on the last day, and because as you might be aware that this Bhaktivedanta Research Center was primarily established to preserve, to decipher, and to spread the wisdom of Indian culture, religion, philosophy, etc. But at the same time, as I mentioned in the beginning, also that we are also very much interested to educate ourselves in different ideas, different philosophical thoughts and debates that one finds in different other traditions, especially American and British, philosophical tradition. So, keeping that in mind, we are organizing this course on Western philosophy. And in February, we will be organizing a similar course, similar week-long course on Indian philosophy. And many, important scholars, both from India and abroad, have agreed to join us online. So we are really looking forward to it. And on the last day, we will have a kind of uh, session where we will also ask for your inputs, for your suggestions, not only on this particular workshop, but in general on the prospective research activities of this center. And as you know that it is uh, primarily meant for you, in the sense that we hope that by organizing these kinds of discourses, your research interest will be ignited. You will be more and more involved, engaged in different areas of philosophy, culture, religion, etc. So this is actually, if you know uh, are benefited, if you get some ideas, some food for thought from these discussions, our attempt will be a success. So it's for you that we are organizing all these academic events.
Then one thing I want to ask,
Yes.
there is no time mentioned of the valedictory session in the PDF. What is the time of the valedictory?
It will, just follow the feedback discussion. There is nothing formal there. We will just say a few words. Maybe the academic dean of this center will also say a few words to you about his vision about this center, etc., about his future plan about this center. That's all. So, friends, participants, uh, welcome you to this second session today. In the first session, we listened to a lecture on universal in Western metaphysical tradition. We, go ahead. We carry on that discourse now. Let us welcome Dr. Tamoghna Sarkar from the Department of Philosophy at Jadavpur University. He is an expert both on Western and Indian philosophy. He has many important publications to his credit. And today he will be speaking on a philosophical discourse on universals, a historical overview. So over to you, Dr. Sarkar, please.
Thank you, Nirmaloda. So I am thankful to Bhaktivedanta Research Center and Professor Nirmalo Narayan Chakraborty and Madhuchanda Sen for inviting me as a speaker. So my topic today is philosophical discourses on universals, a historical overview. So I'm starting. The problem of universals is a perennial one. The existence of universals and its supposed distinction with particulars is one of the most durable, hotly debated topics in metaphysics. The debate cuts across the fields of epistemology, logic, and philosophy of language, in addition to metaphysics. Western philosophical discourses on universals, from its very beginning in the ancient Greece to the present time, remain shrouded in considerable disagreement on almost every aspect of the topic. From the formulation of the problem to how the problem should be resolved, there are multiple approaches and alternatives. In general and provisionally formed, the problem of universals involves explaining how different objects can be members of the same kind, or how different particulars can be members of the same class or set. Is it because of a shared or shareable property, or is it due to a linguistic and or mental phenomenon that the same predicate is applied to or is true of different subjects? Or is it because of an ontologically primitive fact of resemblance? Given that something called property is an existent thing, then the problem of universal is the problem of how a property can be shared by more than one thing. That is, how different things agree in property, and how that shared or shareable property is simultaneously located in its entirety in multiple locations. It is a problem mainly of metaphysics. But when we are formulating the problem as how it is possible for us to know individual objects as instances of kind, then it is a problem primarily of epistemology. And how general terms like red, horse, beauty, etc. should properly be used and general ideas be formed, then it is a problem primarily of logic and language. The way in which one answers the question at one level has direct implication for one's opinion at the other levels. When we sort or classify things, we say that they are the same in certain respects. Same in certain respects. Two different things may have the very same color, for example, white. Assuming sameness in certain respects as meaning strict identity, realists about universals uphold that one or numerically the same thing white qualifies numerically the different particulars simultaneously. That color white is then capable of qualifying those particulars anywhere and anytime. Property of being white is thus a universal, or the general word white denotes a universal property whiteness. The general word apple applies to things that share the universal we associate with apple, namely being an apple. So realists about universals typically think that shared property, for example, whiteness, relations, for example, betweenness, and kinds, for example, gold, they are all universals. The nominalists about universals in its minimal sense, there are various senses of nominalism. In its minimal sense, nominalists are those who reject universals. Nominalists, by rejecting universals, do not take the word same used in the present context in a strict sense. Realists would take the word same in the the same as numerical identity, but nominalists would not take the word same in its strict sense. Most of nominalists rely upon a weaker equivalence relation than strict numerical identity, and we will see it later. What will be the weaker equivalence relation? The nominalist about universals in its minimalism are those who reject universals. They may reject ontological existences of properties, numbers, possible worlds, propositions, etc. But mere rejection of them does not make one a nominalist. To be a nominalist, one needs to reject them because they are projected as universals. Nominalists may also agree that the word apple applies to the apples, but they deny that anything common to the apples makes the word apply to them. Two apples are the same, or two red apples are the same in certain respects. In these sentences, the words same are not used in nominalists by the nominalists as strict identity. They do not mean that a common repeatable universal is shared. A version of nominalism thus asserts that sameness in properties or being member of the same class is just similarity or resemblance. An account of it and an account of that resemblance need not posit universals. Sameness in properties is nothing but being different members of a class that satisfied a weaker equivalence relation than strict identity. An equivalence relation is symmetrical, transitive, and reflexive. Strict identity is also an equivalence relation, but it satisfies additionally the law of indiscernibility of identicals. And we will see what it means in our chapter on Leibniz. So with these preliminary remarks on the problem of universals, I am now entering into a historical roller coaster on approaches of different Western philosophers to the formulations of the problem of universals and their attempted solutions. But before we begin, there are two caveats. Without understanding the philosophical presuppositions and the internal structure of the system built by a philosopher, it is not possible to have a full grasp of the topic concerned. My aim here is just to give a historical overview of the path that the problem of universals traversed till date. And the second caveat is that I have mostly followed a standard or better, a more received interpretation of the philosophers to follow. There may be some other interpretative differences in some cases for some philosophers. Let us start with Plato. One can see in Platonic philosophy at least one version of the realist position, depending, of course, on one's interpretation of some notoriously difficult passages in the dialogues. Plato's position in the Republic and other dialogues focuses on learning by recollection and implies that there really is an archetype form by which we can recognize the features that are repeatable, that are repeatedly found in individual things. The forms are the eternal, changeless, perfect archetypes of all phenomena in the physical world. Only these forms are truly real, and only knowledge of the forms is true knowledge. The forms transcend phenomena and can be grasped only by the intellect. Forms like goodness, beauty, equality, bigness, likeness, unity, being, sameness, difference, etc., are abstract objects. Abstract objects in the early modern terminology, Plato did not use it because these are abstract objects because they are not located either in space or in time. They are transcendent. No actual object is the perfect representation of its form, which constitutes its essential basis. Some scholars, modern scholars, do not consider Platonic forms or abstract objects as universals, since they are not worldly. They are neither spatial or temporal. But assuming the widespread usage of Platonic forms as universals, we may classify him as a realist, as a transcendent realist, in the sense that he asserts the existence of transcendent universals before the existence of particular things. That is universalia ante rem, universals prior to the thing. The advocate of anti-rem realism is said to believe that there can be universals such as being a winged quadruped, even if there are no particular entities that have such a property. So universals on Plato's view can exist even when uninstantiated. Next, the colossal of Western philosophy, Aristotle. There are many interpretative differences regarding what constitutes Aristotelian forms or universals, which of course are spatio-temporally located in the material objects, unlike Platonic transcendent forms. Here we follow a standard authentic account of Aristotle. Oh, there is another singular, which is determined by the universal. Mere substratum, but a special underlying subject, the higher level genus, which is not yet determined by a last differentia. Matter of an existent individual, for example, a golden statue, apart from which matter concerned is merely a potential state or potential statue. So it is the form of a substance that makes it the kind of thing that it is, the nature or essence of a hylomorphic compound. A hylomorphic production is described by the name of its form, not by that of its matter. Because what is produced is a statue, not gold. Of course, what is made of gold may still be described in terms of its material components, but we should call it not gold, but golden or made of gold. It cannot be identified, the statue cannot be identified with the gold of which it is made. As kind determining properties and principles of unity, Aristotelian substantial forms, in one interpretation, are universals. Aristotelian substantial forms or universals are complex organizational properties. A complex, causally linked functional arrangement that makes something what it fundamentally is. For example, tissue, cells, blood, bones, etc. These are all matter. Do not make a human being and are different in different individuals. But the complex causal arrangement that makes that matter a functional human being is the form humanity. Socrates, it is a quotation from Metaphysics Z8. Socrates and Callias are distinct because of their matter, but the same in form. For them to be the same in form is for one and the same substantial form to be predicated of two different clumps of matter. And being predicated of many is what makes something a universal. In true sense, the realist assumption that the numerically same property may be repeatable or exemplified by a number of objects stems from the Aristotelian system. He countenances properties that are multiply exemplified while rejecting the idea that there exists any uninstantiated universal. In rebus realism, that is the Aristotelian realism, in re universals are wholly located at each place they occupy. It is the prime feature of Aristotelian thesis on universals. Aristotelian realism about universals is designated by some scholars as mitigated, since universals for Aristotle are entities of a radically different sort than that of individuals. Universals are out there in the world, spatiotemporally multiply located, but they do not have the robust nature of individuals. Moreover, universal properties do not characterize matter in the same way as other inhering properties of it do. Humanity, for example, inheres in Socrates' matter, but it does not characterize Socrates' matter. His matter isn't human. Rather, humanity characterizes the individual Socrates. Other attributes, on the other hand, do not join with matter to generate substances. If they characterize uh, uh, other attributes other than universal or forms, do not generate substance. For example, if Socrates is seated, seatedness inheres in him, it also characterizes him. But the inherence of seatedness in Socrates does not generate a substance, but the form and matter generate a substance. Even if Aristotle's logical works, that is the treatises handed down to us as the organon, can be safely said to advocate realism about universals, his position in metaphysics, especially in J13, is open to diverse interpretations. According to one, Aristotle's substantial forms are not universals at all, but each belongs exclusively to the particular whose form it is. And there are therefore as many substantial forms of a given kind as there are particulars of that kind. Proponents of particular forms, this interpretation that Aristotelian forms are not universal but particular forms or essences, include these modern scholars, Sellars, Harter, Hardman, and others. And they mostly attribute Aristotle a moderate nominalist position that universals are names that can be true of many individuals. Some commentators also attribute to him a conceptualist theory, according to which universals are mere concepts. Next, we turn to the medieval philosophy, Porphyry and Boethius. The text that gives rise to the medieval controversy over universals is a commentary on Aristotle's categories. The Isagoge, or introduction, by Porphyry. Porphyry expresses the problem in terms of an Aristotelian framework. In particular, in Porphyry's work, universals are described in terms of Aristotelian predicables of genus, species, difference, property, and accident, which are organized in the hierarchical structure of the so-called tree of Porphyry. Porphyry himself maintains an intriguing agnosticism about the status of universals, because he brackets the question of whether the numbers of the Porphyrian tree exist in sensibles as separated from universals, or they exist in the thought alone. He didn't answer it, and he brackets the question whether it is existent in sensibles or in thought alone. But of course, Porphyry's work raises certain basic questions about universals and inspired other medieval philosophers to ponder over it. Boethius, in his commentary on Porphyry, presents his own attempt to answer the question that Porphyry had raised without resolving. We can credit Boethius with the first noteworthy criticism of Aristotelian realism about universals, although his position is also a type of realism. For Boethius, the resolution of the question of universals turns on a proper understanding of intellectual abstraction. Though universals subsist in sensibles, they nonetheless can be distinguished from sensibles only in the intellect. By the process of abstraction, we are able to separate intellectually what is not separate in reality. Hence, for Boethius, universality or generality refers to the mood by which the mind separately grasps a form that does not actually exist separately from the matter for which it is a structural principle. Considered then as an intellectual way of representing what is within a material object as a structural principle, a universal for Boethius is not a thing in itself, but a mental representation with a foundation in things. We find a revised Platonist account of universals in the work of the church father, Saint Augustine. For him, our cognition of universals and all the necessary features of the world derives not from our abstraction from the contents of our sensory experience, but rather from a divine illumination of our intellect that has its source in God's own ideas. In his doctrine of divine illumination, forms are contained in the divine understanding, and the human soul also access those forms, but that human soul must be holy and pure. Then only human soul obtains a specific supernatural aid in its acts of understanding by gaining a direct insight into the divine ideas themselves. In the post-Augustinian Christian tradition, most of the philosophers come theologians admitted the existence of divine ideas. But there was an Aristotelian attempt to naturalize Augustinian illumination in the work of Thomas Aquinas. Thomas proposes that God illumines our intellect not by directly operating on it, but rather by providing the human mind with an agent intellect that is able to abstract out universal features that correspond to what is contained in divine ideas. In this way, one can admit the existence of divine ideas without holding that our universal cognition involves any direct access to these ideas. Peter Abelard, French philosopher, Peter Abelard, sometimes designated as the first nominalist theory, Abelard's theory is the first nominalist theory in the history of Western philosophy, according to which universals are not things, but only words. But the lack of stability and the vagueness of some concerned concepts make his so-called nominalism unclear. Abelard's focus is primarily semantic in character. He asks how universal terms accomplish their function of representing in a general way that occurs repeatedly in diverse objects. In his search for a common cause that can justify the imposition of universal terms, he settles on what he refers to as the status of those things to which the universal term is to be applied. The status of a dog, that is being a dog, is not a thing. It is neither any singular dog nor a general dog, but there is no such thing as general or universal dog. Even if being a dog is common in the required matter, that is, it is something in which all dogs agree, yet it is clearly not an existing thing for Abelard. So by the term status, he does not mean to suggest that a universal is some existing thing. But for Abelard, status, for example, status of being a dog or uh, being an apple is not a concept of our mind either. It is not dependent on the activity of our minds. Rather, it is a way to designate that which true propositions about the objects in question signify. A universal is thus not some abstract entity. Rather, what is signified by being a dog provides the needed justification or the status of being correctly asserted to fall under a given concept. That is the common cause for Victor Abelard. His approach places the justification for universal terms on an act of intellect called the judgments that we make, rather than on what Aristotle called the first act of intellect, the apprehension of forms by abstraction. So he is emphasizing on judgments to form universal ideas, or to form the common cause for the application of a general term as judgments, not the process of abstraction. Then Duns Scotus is a realist. According to Scotus, actual causal relation between things generates resemblance, and resemblance proves the real existence of common natures or common essences in things. Common natures are the basis for universal predication for Scotus, and the truth maker for our true universal cognition. In Scotus's ontology, a substance's essence, that is common nature, is a proper part of the substance, and the relation between the essence and the substance is not one of exemplification or instantiation. Substances are mereological wholes with proper parts. A material substance, say a golden statue, possesses its matter, gold, and the substantial form. The substantial form of a statue has further two parts: common nature, that is statuehood, and the statue's individual thisness or individual essence. So for him, substantial form is divided into two parts, although their distinction is not is formal. One is common nature and another is individual thisness or individual essence, that is heicity. Heicity or individual essence is the principle of individuation, and yet not something that itself needs to be individuated. It is not dependent on other things to be individuated, but it individuates the object. Individual thisness contracts the common nature to the singularity of each individual. Common natures cannot exist without being individuated by individual essence in some singular substance or other. Hence, his realism is a form of mereological realism. The distinction between common nature and the individual essence is formal rather than genuine. Individual thisness is only a privation of common nature. The famous medieval philosopher William of Ockham is a nominalist without doubt. We have doubt whether Abelard is a nominalist, But Occam is an uncompromising nominalist. He was a junior contemporary of Scotus at Oxford and criticized Scotus in many respects. According to him, everything in the world is singular. Generality is a semantic feature, not an ontological one, and universals are nothing but signs. Universality is either a property of some act of thought or of the linguistic expression of that act. General terms, relational terms, and quantitative terms all refer to real things. He is not denying. But these are not extra objects in addition to the things that are referred to by non-general, non-relational, non-quantitative terms. There is no additional object called universal. There are no special sort of entities that correspond to these terms. The problem of universals is thus not an epistemological problem for him. It is not an epistemological problem of accounting for the ways in which the intellect abstracts a common nature that is inherent in individual objects. Nor is it a metaphysical problem of understanding how common natures are individuated in order to have existence as single entities. Rather, the problem of universals is a logico-linguistic problem of explaining how general terms are used within propositions so as to refer to the individuals they signify. The solution to this problem, Occam thinks, is a matter of the careful use of the technical devices of logic for quantifying and specifying the reference of the terms used in propositions. So Occam influenced modern nominalists in many ways. And another thing that parsimony, the virtue of parsimony, Occam's razor, is often regarded as one of the main motivations for modern nominalism. But it is to be seen that neither Abelard nor Occam appeals to parsimony considerations in their arguments against universals. Later nominalists use this virtue to criticize classical realists' position that universals are abundant. Then coming to the early modern era, early modern philosophy, the early modern era is characterized by a marked consensus in favor of nominalism and some brands of conceptualism, sometimes included under nominalism also. Conceptualism can be included as a type of nominalism. Most of the early modern philosophers more or less agree that the objective world is a world of particulars, and that universals are, if at all a possibility, at best linguistic or mental constructions derived from resemblances by a process of abstraction. But Descartes' position is a bit interesting. He insists that universal cognition depends not on abstraction from particular sensory ideas, but rather on the deployment of purely intellectual ideas that are innate, as opposed to adventitious or factitious. We do not receive or construct these ideas, these innate ideas, but rather find them ready-made, at least potentially, within our own mind. He accepts in the fifth meditation that there are true and immutable natures unconstructed by your mind, but also accepts that at least some of these natures can simply be identified with our innate intellectual ideas, Nonetheless, such ideas provide a basis for universal cognition that is itself antecedent to our perception of resemblances among particular sensory objects. In this way, Descartes offers a conceptualist form of moderate realism about universals than we find in the medieval period. Since we have seen that medieval moderate realists tended to place common natures in the sensory objects themselves. But Descartes disagreed. Spinoza espouses a brand of nominalism about abstractions and universals, and he frequently warns against confusing universals with real things. Universals are nothing but modes of thought. Representational content of mental states does not directly correspond to the mind-independent nature of the represented objects. Spinoza also avoids going as far as an extreme early modern nominalists like Hobbes. Hobbes accepted constitutive role of science for human thought. For Hobbes, universals are not even any non-linguistic idea or concept formed in the mind. Only the intervention of linguistic science allows us to gain access to generality. So Hobbes was an extreme nominalist because he accepted that universals are not even concept, but mere construct of linguistic science. But Spinoza claims that ensia rationis, like universals, are not fictitious beings, which means they do not depend on the will alone, nor do they consist of any terms connected with one another. So it is Spinoza's way of saying that universals are not merely verbal or nominal entities, and their content is not purely conventional. So he is a moderate nominalist or conceptualist. Leibniz introduces a distinction between ideas and concepts. He reserves the term ideas for the intelligible contents originally present in God's intellect and derivatively implanted in us. While concepts are our ways of grasping these intelligible content, intelligible contents. Although we have an access mediated by science to divine ideas, still we are bound, at least in most cases, to draw our concepts from things by way of abstraction. So we are assured that our abstract concepts have some foundation in reality. Leibniz holds that when an idea represents a thing, it does intrinsically and essentially, not as a mere result of an extrinsic or contingent act of human mind, as is admitted by Locke. We find a blend of Christianized Platonism and conceptualism in Leibniz's theory of universals. Leibniz's law of the identity of indiscernibles is very important for the later theorists, but he did not use this law to form his theory of universals. But later, the law of identity of indiscernibles acts as a point of controversy whether exactly similar but numerically distinct particulars are possible. exactly similar but numerically distinct particulars are possible or not, it was a point of contention for later philosophers. But Leibniz's law, that is law of identity of indiscernibles, states that no two numerically distinct things can exactly resemble each other. That is, no two numerically distinct things can have exactly the same properties. That is, and properties for realists, for at least some realists, properties are universals. So for Leibniz, in Leibniz law, no two numerically distinct things can exactly resemble each other. But later philosophers provide many counterexamples against this law. Locke holds that generality is a property of some of our ideas. Our general ideas depend on nominal essences that we construct rather than on the real essences that we discover in nature. We form general ideas by abstracting from the particular ideas we receive directly from sense experience. There is no foundation in reality for our general ideas beyond a primitive sort of resemblance that particular sensory ideas bear to each other. And for Locke, there is no need to ground resemblance on the sharing of a common property. A general name signifies an abstract idea in the mind of the person who uses the name, and the correct application of the name is determined entirely by this idea. We do typically try to use a name to signify an idea like the ones other speakers signify by the same name in order to be understood. The ability of general ideas to represent a plurality of objects is given by their indeterminate character, which is the product of a mental act of abstraction. So for Locke, the ability of general ideas to represent many objects, different objects, is the product of the mental act of abstraction. The mind, after comparing several complex particular ideas, is able to single out and generalize a single aspect or set of aspects in which they agree. So for him, abstraction is mental. Both George Berkeley and David Hume continue to admit that generality is a property of some of our ideas. They nonetheless deny that general ideas differ from particular ones in virtue of their content. In their view, a general idea is general simply in virtue of serving as a sign of a class of similar ideas. As a sign of a class of similar ideas. In this way, a general idea is general. Berkeley himself recognizes that the maxim, everything that exists in particular, everything that exists is particular. It was universally received in Berkeley's time. But for Berkeley, Lockean psychological process of abstraction to form abstract general ideas is wrong. He provided many criticisms of Locke, which I am not entering into. But Berkeley's positive thesis is that for him, there is a way of giving a semantics for general terms without appealing to intermediary ideas at all. When I use the term white, I can refer indifferently to any of the ideas of milk, chalk, or snow. One need have only one of them in mind and let it do duty for other ideas. I may even consider the chalk merely as white without attending to the other qualities making up the complex of the chalk. Words have semantic properties, and general words have a special semantic property called indifferent denotation. It is a technical term of Berkeley. General words indifferently denote or signify all the particular things of that kind. General terms indifferently signify multiple particular ideas. David Hume supports Berkeley's criticisms of the Lockean abstract general ideas, and his positive thesis is that a general term, for example, navy blue, is general in its representation of the plurality of navy blue ideas that resemble each other. In themselves, independent of their resemblance, these ideas appear as mere navy blue. They resemble, navy blue ideas resemble because they simply present navy blue. There is nothing more to it. This plurality of navy blue ideas consists of both simple navy blue ideas and complex ideas that have one or more simple navy blue ideas as their constituents. But the general term navy blue corresponds to any of these navy blue ideas. They are all particular and determinate, but general in their representation, in virtue of their resemblance, and resemblance is primitive. Any of them can serve as a general idea of navy blue. Many recent scholars are interpreting Hume's simple sensible perceptions of whose bundle the mind is for Hume as tropes, that is simple or particular qualities. Accordingly, similarities of simple perceptions are explained by those tropes themselves and their resemblance. So resemblances among navy blue ideas, according to some interpreters, are therefore essentially similarities between tropes. And we will see the trope theory later. Then coming to the 20th century analytic philosophy, there was a revival and renewed interest in the realism about universals in the works of Moore and Russell at the beginning of 20th century. Early Russell, in his logical atomism period, argued that the traditional distinction between universal and particulars did mark a genuine difference, that both universals and particulars existed, and that neither was reducible to the other. Much later, his position changes, and he revokes his earlier arguments with a claim that particulars can, after all, be regarded as no more than complexes of universals. But early Russell's position on universals is that of a Neoplatonic realist. Universals are independent of thought or apprehension. Our thought is necessarily differentiable from the universal because taking the universal to be identical with thoughts robs it of its essential universality. Since one man's act of thought is necessarily a different thing from another man's. The idea, so the idea of what whiteness, that is universal, cannot be identical between the thoughts of two men. Early Russellian Neoplatonic realism is essentially an indirect realism, of course, because the theory that our understanding of reality is mediated by the veil of our senses. We access reality indirectly via sense data. In this phase, in the early phase, Russell also claims that proper names stand for particulars, while other substantives, adjectives, propositions and verbs stand for universals. He criticizes nominalists that nominalists must commit themselves to a universal relation of resemblance in order to avoid a vicious resemblance regress. So he accuses nominalists that they must accept resemblance as a type of universal relation. For later Russell, in the period of writing Human Knowledge, particulars such as what the term "this" denotes, this is the particular, are not fundamental, unrepeatable entities. The ultimate logical constituents are universals. Qualities or properties are immanent universals, wholly repeatable in many particulars at the same time. Since a particular is just a bundle of universals. So, later Russell accept a bundle theory. Universal properties do not need a substratum to be exemplified. Every bundle, that is bundle of properties, can, in theory, be defined by the totality of its properties. But since we are not omniscient, we need proper names for the particular bundles in practice. So for empirical purpose, we have to name, because we cannot name each and every property. We have to name the particular bundle of properties. A quality or property linguistically is not a predicate for later Russell, since there is no subject to which we could attribute qualities. This is read is not a subject predicate proposition where some quality is ascribed to a substance. Rather, it is in the form redness is here. Red is not a predicate, but a name for Russell. And a complex of compressed bundle of properties is something that can have a name. Thus, here is the proper name of a bundle of compressed, that is, co-present properties. Redness is one of the qualities that constitutes hair. In Austria, the members of the Vienna Circle regarded the problem of universals as a pseudo problem, and realism and nominalism as pseudo statements. Carnap. Later, Wittgenstein also argued that all metaphysical claims, such as the claim that universals exist, are nonsensical at bottom. But his important observation, later Wittgenstein's important observation, that many general words form a family of resembling cases rather than applying in virtue of a common feature. um, and he claims that if the family resemblance can dissolve the so-called problem of universals. Quine and David argue for the ontological innocence of predicates to deny that universals exist. So they are also nominalists. The semantic cast to the problem of universals offers nominalists a way to resist the claims of realism. Nominalists may hold that A is F is true just in case there is an X such that the term A referred to X and the predicate F applies to X. The term A referred to X and the F applies to X. So on this account, there need not be any entity to which the predicate F refers to account for the truth of A is F. In this semantics, F is just the name of a linguistic item, a predicate, not a property. On Quine's account, the nominalist is one who holds that what appear to be names of universals do not actually name anything at all. Next, turning to a special problem for realism. Consider the sentence X is not self-instantiating. X is not self-instantiating. In the case of predicating the denial of self-instantiation, it turns out that we cannot have in mind a universal that we intend the predicate to stand for. The predicate that is not self-instantiation. It would be the universal of not self-instantiation. We cannot have in mind a universal of non-self-instantiation because no such universal can exist, for at least for nominalists. If X exists, then it instantiates itself. If non-self-instantiation is a universal, then if X exists, it does not instantiate itself. Thus, if X exists, an impossible contradictory situation is implied. If X exists, how can it does not self-instantiate? Because no truth implies an impossibility, so we have to conclude that X does not exist. For this, in virtue of this argument, many nominalists hold that it seems right to infer that not every grammatically well-formed predicate can denote a property. To avoid this sort of problems, some recent supporters of universals contend that only sparse properties can be universals. Sparse, SPRC, sorry, SPRAC. Only sparse properties can be universals, not abundant properties. Sparse properties are those that account for the resemblance and the causal powers of things. Then the color of a table, mass of the earth, charge of electrons, they're all sparse properties. While being mentioned in one of Tagore's writings, or being self-identical, or being non-self-instantiating, they are not sparse properties, but mere abundant properties. No negative properties are sparse. Sparse properties may also be called natural properties, are only those posited by the best physical theory or are used in scientific explanations. So for recent supporters, only sparse properties can be universals. One famous recent supporter of realism is David Armstrong, D.M. Armstrong. His defense of realism claims that universals are sparse and spatiotemporal. That is spatiotemporal. That means it is not the result of any abstraction. Even though particulars instantiate universals, that is, universals are immanent, this involves no relation between them. Instantiation for Armstrong is not a relation. Rather, particulars and universals are bound together in an ontological unity. For him, the basic constituents of the universe are neither mere particulars nor uninstantiated universals, but their states of affairs, that is, particulars having universals. The states of affairs are basic constituents. Particulars and universals only exist within states of affairs. Since both universals and particulars are incomplete entities, because they are not capable of entering, they are not capable of existing apart from the other, and because they are incomplete, they are not capable of entering into relations also. So his brand of realism can be called a non-relational realism. Still, to say that universals and particulars cannot live alone is not to say that they do not exist. They simply always exist together. A much more ontologically oriented, moderate form of nominalism, very popular nowadays, begins by conceding to the realist that there do exist in re, in the things themselves, properties, and that there do exist in re relations that hold between things. Moderate nominalists concede this. But it is argued against the realist that these properties and relations are not universals but are particulars. As particular as the propertied or related things. Some designated these particular properties as tropes. A trope is a particular thing and can be instantiated by only one entity. The red color of a particular flower is one trope. The color of any other flower is another trope. Even if the flowers have the very same shade of red, tropes will be different. In fact, strictly speaking, each red part of a flower has its own trope of redness. This is the extreme view of trope nominalism. But one version of trope nominalism holds that what makes a trope red is its resemblance with certain tropes, the red ones, rather than other ones, that is blue, green, or yellow ones. Tropes are of the same kind when they resemble each other. Another version of trope nominalism maintains that red tropes form a primitive natural class of resembling particulars. Most of the trope nominalists appeal to an equivalence relation of exact resemblance instead of numerical identity to account for the notion of sameness among members of a class or a natural kind. The exact resemblance relation is symmetrical, transitive, and reflexive. Such equivalence class, so exact resemblance is an equivalence relation. Such equivalence classes of particularized properties and relations appear to be able to do at least a good deal of metaphysical work that universals for realists do. But resemblance nominalism without accepting tropes is also possible. It takes resemblance nominalism without accepting tropes, takes resemblance as fundamental or primitive. According to resemblance nominalism, two red roses are red because they resemble each other, and it is false that they resemble each other because they are red. They are red because they resemble each other, not the other way around. There are no properties, neither particular nor universal, for this brand of resemblance nominalism. But what makes red things red is that they satisfy certain resemblance conditions. In one version of the theory, the property of being red is a certain class whose members satisfy certain definite resemblance conditions. The resemblance nominalist must take resemblance to be a primitive notion to make their theory stronger. And resemblance does not involve similarity in respects or aspects or delimitations, although one can admit of degree of resemblance. So resemblance is accepted as primitive and not any similarity in any aspect or in respect. As primitive thing, one can accept degree but not similarity or identity in aspect. The resemblance between X and Y admits only basic facts of the form X resembles Y to such and such a degree. Other versions of nominalism are also possible. We are not going into that. Non-acceptance of immanent or transcendent universals is the bare minimum criterion for being a nominalist. So my concluding remarks are these, that there are many approaches to the question of whether universals exist and its supposed relation to particulars. And this presentation does not in any way exhaust the approaches to the problem of universals. Rather, it serves to indicate the persistent and multifaceted presence of the issue of universals in the Western philosophical discourses, starting from the ancient Greece to the present day. A philosopher's view on the topic of universal, very relative to her philosophical methodology, her views on mind, matter, and property, and her commitment or lack of commitment to a substance attribute conception of particular objects. But it is intellectually enriching to appreciate the fact that the ancient topic of universals was reconfigured time to time rather than merely rejected. And if at all rejected, it again resurfaced to persist till date. Thank you.
Wonderful. This is indeed a very, very nice historical survey of theories of universal, right from Plato till the trope theory of universal held by many contemporary philosophers. And one of the special features of this discourse that I find is allusion to the medieval theories of universals, which sometimes I think don't get the attention from the philosophers that they deserve. So thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar, for this wonderful survey. So we have around 15 minutes in hand. So participants, you're please kind requested to come up with any questions and comments or clarifications on the wonderful lecture that Dr. Sarkar has given. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, sir. In one of your slides on the medieval philosophers on the problem of universal, particularly on the slide, particularly about the slide on
Yes.
particularly about the slide on Porphyrian Boethius, you talked about
Porphyrian Boethius.
trees. Yes, yes, you talked about Porphyrian trees. So if you can please elaborate a little bit on that topic.
No, porphyry trees is not that relevant here in the problem of universal. I have indicated that porphyry just reformulated the problem, Aristotelian problem, but did not answer it. Porphyry's formulation is described in terms of Aristotelian predicables, and his tree is the tree of genus and species per differentia.
Okay.
So
okay.
it is Aristotelian theme, but Porphyry did not give any positive thesis about universal,
Okay.
but inspired many other medieval philosophers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Part genus et differentia is the motto of Porphyry tree.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Any other questions or comments or clarifications?
Hello, sir. Can I
Yes,
ask?
please.
Hmm.
Yes, please
Yes.
go ahead.
Sir, I just want to know, is there any difference between the term general and universal? I just want to.
In general, the term general is used with respect to ideas or terms, but it can be used interchangeably. But those who are realists about universals do not generally use general, the term general, but they used universals as an existing thing. But general is common to general ideas or general terms in this way.
Okay, sir.
But the idea is that generality of cognition or generality of ideas. This is what referred to by the term general. Okay.
Okay, sir.
But realist in general will not say that there is something, some ontological category called general. They call it universal.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I have another question. In the criticism of
Yes.
in the criticism of the theory of universal, like we are labeling some philosophers as nominalists, some as resemblance theorists. Like that, are there any philosophers who can be labeled as strong or hardcore mentalists?
No, resemblance theories are nominalists.
Okay.
I am using the term nominalism in a minimal sense, that those who are rejecting universals are nominalists. So resemblance nominalism is a type of nominalism. It is a type of nominalism because they do not accept the existence of universals.
So can we mark a particular type of particular type of criticism against the theory of universal as hardcore mentalists? Like these philosophers are saying this, all the things about universal, about the theory of universal is nothing but our mental reconstructions. Like it only exists in our mind.
Conceptualism, yes, mentalism or conceptualism is a type. You can fall it under a brand of nominalism. You can call it a brand of nominalism also.
This is also nominalism.
Conceptualism it can be clubbed under nominalism. Because our concepts and language, they are interrelated. Our ideas and language they're interrelated. Ideas are expressed through language.
Okay.
So we cannot separate. There is no
Difference
sharp
between
distinction between idea and language, between our thought and language.
language
Okay.
usage. Yes, yes.
So you can club it under nominalism.
Okay, okay,
But
okay.
some theories like that of extreme nominalists, like I have told of Occam or Hobbes,
Yes.
they did not even think that universal can be mental construct. They are suggesting that only after the introduction of signs, SIGN, signs or
Yes.
symbols, can the generality come. Only after the introduction of symbol or language.
Okay, okay,
Apart
okay.
from these extreme sort of nominalists, most of the nominalists are also conceptualists in a sense. Those
Oh,
are only extreme nominalists, those who are accepting that generality is merely linguistic, not even in mental representation or mental abstraction.
yes.
Then you can distinguish nominalism from conceptualism.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.